everyone. This is Kathy from Homespun Seasonal Living, and we're talking today with Colleen from Grow, Forage, Cook, Ferment. And we are going to talk all about foraging and as part of our Cultivate and Nourish project. And so we're just going to say hi to Colleen.
Hello. Hi, Kathy. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And Colleen has 5 particular plants that she's going to talk to us about, and we're going to specifically talk about backyard foraging, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, backyard foraging is one of my favorite things to talk about because it's plants that most people know, but they don't know are useful.
Right. Right. And so we're thinking these are probably plants. I looked at the list before we started, and I think these are plants probably almost everyone could find, unless maybe you're in the high desert, I'm guessing, maybe.
Yeah, or tropical, maybe. But yeah, but most people, I would say, in the United States or in North America, in most regions except for desert places, yeah, probably. And maybe like Florida, like southern Florida, you may not be able to find some of these. But
okay, great. All right. And outside my window, I'm not going to try and swing the camera around because the first plant we're going to talk about is dandelions, and we're recording this in mid-May, and I live in Northwest Montana, and my yard is a sea of dandelions.
Oh, wow.
I mean, we were out there earlier, and I actually love it. I think it's just beautiful. I just love it. And I think most people, if they would just look at it as like a sea of yellow wildflowers instead of like the dreaded dandelion, they would actually see it as quite beautiful.
Yeah. That's the thing. Dandelions are sort of maligned as this weed, but they have so many uses and people don't understand how useful they actually are. So,
well, will you tell us?
Yes. So dandelion, most people can identify dandelions pretty easily, although there are a few lookalikes of dandelions, but the good thing to know about them is none of them are toxic. So that's pretty good to know about. But the one thing, if you are wanting to like make sure that you actually have dandelions, is that it's on a single unbranching hollow stem. So some of the lookalikes have multiple stems going off, where the dandelion is just one stem and it's hollow. So that's one way to know that you actually have a dandelion. Like I said, they're pretty easy to identify, so most people won't have trouble. But so the flowers are edible, and you can use them in all kinds of delicious foods. They're often used in sort of like sweet treats, you can make jelly or jam or put them in cookies or muffins, cakes. A lot of people like to use them to make dandelion wine, or I like to do mead, which is wine made with honey. So there's, lots of really great ways to use the flowers for edible uses, but then they're also medicinal. And infuse them in oil. They're good for pain relief, so you can infuse them in oil to make a salve or a body butter with it. And so that's one way that I really like to use dandelion flowers. And then of course dandelion leaves, many people might know that the leaves are edible. They're kind of bitter, so if you pick a leaf and you just eat it, it might have a lot of bitterness to it that you may not prefer. But if you just add a few leaves here and there to a salad, with other like more mild tasting leaves, then you're not going to get as much of that bitterness. But those bitter qualities make it really good for the digestive system. So, and the roots too have this bitterness and are also good for the digestive system. So, but the leaves you can also turn into a pesto. They actually make one of my favorite of all the like wild leaf pestos. I really love dandelion leaf pesto. Yeah. So, or you can saute them up, just with other greens. And like I said, the roots are edible too, also bitter, but can be dried to make dandelion root tea or dandelion root coffee. It has kind of a coffee flavor to it, so it doesn't have the caffeine that coffee has, but people do like to use it as like a coffee substitute. And or you could also use the roots to make digestive bitters. So you infuse them in alcohol like vodka, and you can add other flavorings and stuff, and then just use little drops at a time for like digestive bitters. So that's a lot for dandelion. Right.
But it's everywhere, so you can make use of it, right?
It is everywhere, yeah. And I kind of probably just scratched the surface there of all of its uses. There are so many uses for dandelions, so that's why I don't know, it's such a cool little flower, and I love telling people about it because of those reasons. So
Right.
don't kill your dandelions.
Right. And I find, I don't know if you find, because I don't mind bitter. Actually, I actually kind of like bitter, but I do find that the leaves, if you get them earlier in the spring when they're young,
Yeah.
the smaller the dandelion plant, the less bitter. But if you wait later in the season, or like the really giant leaves, those tend to be more bitter. And that's kind of true for any green.
Yeah, they can definitely be more bitter. Yeah, so the earlier in the season, you're in Montana, we're in Southern Oregon, so we still have dandelions, but they're kind of on their way out. So yeah, we get much warmer faster. So we're kind of in mid to late spring right now, I would say.
Yeah. Whereas I might be in spring until July. So
I know. But right now you go outside and our dandelion leaves, I mean, they're huge. They're like, and like even like the stalks are like way up taller than you can even imagine. So
wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So for sure, no one be spraying the dandelions.
Don't
I feel like most people that already are readers of my blog and of yours don't spray their dandelions anyway, but let's just spread the word for everyone.
Yes, yeah.
Spray them.
Don't spray them. Yeah, use them. And if you don't like them in your yard, pull them out. But there's so many ways you can use them. So.
Right, exactly. In fact, I was out in the my strawberry patch weeding my strawberry patches, and there was some dandelions out there. And so I don't want dandelions in my strawberry patch. It's just not where I want them. And so I do, pull them as much as you can. It's really hard to get the whole root, right? That's the
totally
thing.
Yeah.
But and then so even though it's springtime, normally the roots are harvested in the fall. But since I pulled it, I'm just gonna dry it and use it later.
Yeah, yeah, you can still use them.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. All right, so the second wild backyard plant we were going to talk about is chickweed, which again is something a lot of people probably have, and I think a lot of people ignore, actually.
Yeah, chickweed is one that it'll pop up in your garden beds or just really everywhere. Like every year, I mean, we have patches that come back every year, and I know they're going to come back, but then it'll just pop up like randomly in some other part of the yard. So,
yeah.
And it's very common plant to find like growing among your vegetables or whatever. So it's a low growing plant. It has little teeny tiny white flowers. And the leaves are also small. The one defining characteristic of chickweed is it has a single line of hairs down the stem. Mm-hmm. So that's one really good thing to know. There is one lookalike of chickweed before it flowers, Scarlet Pimpernel. So Scarlet Pimpernel actually has a red flower. So once it's flowering, you know that it's not chickweed. But before it's flowering, the leaves can kind of look like chickweed. So, but it doesn't have that line of hairs. So that's why I always tell people about the line of hairs if you're trying to determine whether it's chickweed or not. Chickweed is much more common of a plant than Scarlet Pimpernel. So you're probably going to be getting a lot more chickweed in your yard. But yeah, it's called chickweed because chickens love it, or at least that's what I've read. And it's true. My chickens go crazy for it. When we get so much of it, I just like throw handfuls to my chickens and they just, they go absolutely nuts for it. But also it's really, really good to eat. It has a really like mild flavor. So doesn't have like bitterness like dandelion does. So it's really good to eat like just raw in salads, or some people like to saute it up like spinach. Again, it's really good in pesto. I really love making chickweed pesto. And chickweed is actually super nutritious. It has like tons of vitamins and minerals, and so it's just really, really good nutritionally. And then it has medicinal uses too. It's very like cooling and hydrating for the skin. So it's really good for the skin. It can be used as a poultice, and that's where you like grind it up, or some people chew it up in their mouth, and you can like use it on rashes or bug bites or whatever. And it can also be infused in oil and made into a salve, or I like to use it. I particularly like to use it as in a lotion bar. So, yeah, but you have to be a little careful with infusing it in oil because it is an herb that likes to be used fresh. Yeah, so what I like to do is wilt it, not dry it completely, but just wilt it a little bit and then infuse it in oil. And it's actually the same with dandelion flowers. You just wilt them a little bit, and then infuse it in oil. And it's kind of a short infusion time so that the oil doesn't go bad because of the water content in the herbs or whatever. But yeah, it's really, really good plant for the skin. And you can tell it has like, it's like mucilage or whatever, you can like press it together and like rub it on your hand, and it's,
It is really great. I particularly like it in lotion too. It's really good for itchy skin. I am
Yeah.
a person who stays incredibly hydrated. I run a lot, so I drink a lot of water. I still have really dry skin on a certain part of my legs, and the chickweed is the thing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, yeah. And that it's just like dandelion. It's another one where people are surprised, like, I can eat that? Really? Like, I have that all over my garden, you know? So
yeah, and I only have it in one small patch, in kind of a shady patch by the garden of all places. It doesn't really grow by the garden, but by the porch, I mean. And so I
yeah,
like nurture it. It's in a little
yeah,
rocky spot.
yeah, yeah. And for us here, our summers get so hot that it's actually gone already. We've already had it, and it's had its time, and it's gone right now. But it'll come back in the fall. So in maybe October or something, we'll start to see it again. And if we don't get very many hard freezes, which some years we do, some years we don't, but like this past winter, it was fairly mild, and we had chickweed growing all winter long.
Oh, well, that's really nice.
Yeah, it grew all winter. It wasn't flowering. It didn't start flowering until maybe February or March, and then it just continued to grow. And then I would say maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, it just pretty much it all went to seed and died off, and that was it for our chickweed. But
Right.
I know it'll be back. So
Right. And mine grows in a spot where I don't water, right? So like I don't
yeah,
actually add it. So it definitely dries out once the summers get dry because I don't
yeah, yeah.
in the garden in a spot that I
Does
don't.
it come back in the fall for you? Or
No, but it'll come back in the spring.
next spring?
Every once in a while in the fall. It just depends on the weather. You know, my nights tend to get really cold once we get to the fall, and I just think it doesn't like it.
Yeah, yeah. It's too cold.
Yeah. All right, and so next we're going to talk about one of my most favorite things in the whole world, just because I think they're so beautiful and I love finding them everywhere, which is wild violets.
Yeah, yeah. Wild violets are awesome because they're just these great little teeny tiny flowers, and I'll walk around our neighborhood, and we just kind of get them in random patches, like a whole bunch grow under our apple tree, and then there's just kind of other random places. But I see people, we don't have like a grassy lawn at all, but some of our neighbors do, and some people's, their yards are just entire wild violets. Like, it's crazy. It's kind of like how the dandelions you have out there now, I've seen like wild violet lawns.
So nice.
I know, and maybe they're annoyed by it, I don't know, but I think it's pretty cool. So yeah, they're another cool little plant. So they have heart-shaped leaves, and then 5 petaled little purple flowers. So they're in the same family as, like, they're in the viola family. So the same as, like, you know, the cultivated viola flowers that you would buy, or pansies. So they look similar to that, but much smaller. And the little flowers are like very fragrant. They kind of have this old-timey scent. But yeah, they're great. And both the flowers and the leaves are edible. The flowers can be candied. I think you have a post on that, do you?
I have on candied herb,
yeah,
right, which is the same process, yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. You can do candied violet flowers is pretty common. You can turn them, if you have enough, you can turn them into jelly. I never seem to have enough to do that.
No, me either.
But it's a great idea. Or syrup, or infused into honey or vinegar. I have done both infused honey and infused vinegar. I think there was one year where we had like tons, and so I was able to fill up 2 little jars, and I did one with vinegar and one with honey. And the vinegar the flowers turn the vinegar like this super bright purple color, and it's just, I don't know, it's great. And then you can use that vinegar, you can use it to make salad dressing or however you would normally use vinegar. But
so I'm gonna ask you a quick question. I'm gonna put you on the spot. I happened to find some in a park, a little local park, where there were some white ones with the purple ones. Do we think that the white ones are cultivated and probably not edible? Do we know?
I don't know. I see the white ones too. I've seen some yards that have a mix of both.
Yeah, and that's what this was.
Yeah, and then I've seen some areas where they pretty much seem to only have the white, and I'm not sure the answer of that. I think it might just be another variation on the wild. I also see yellow occasionally. I saw one we were on a hike the other day, and I saw a bunch of yellow ones, and I knew that they existed, but they're not something that I see very often.
Wow.
So I know that the white ones are just as edible as the purple ones. I think I've heard that the yellow ones, I don't think they're toxic, but they're just not as good for whatever reason. So yeah, it's interesting. But yeah, the flowers are just so fragrant and so nice. They also have they're similar to chickweed in that they have a cooling and hydrating quality to them, and the leaves too. And so like for medicinal purposes, you're mainly probably going to use the leaves, although you could use the flowers too, but they have very similar properties as chickweed. So soothing, cooling for the skin can be used to as a poultice or as for an infused oil or a salve and that kind of thing. And the leaves are edible too. You can eat them in salads or use them for for pesto. I say that all the time, but that's kind of like the main thing that I do with wild weeds. And especially like, even if I don't have enough of one type of weed, you can combine, you know, do a little dandelion, a little chickweed, little violet leaves, or whatever other ones you have, and make like a combined wild weeds pesto.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of pesto, so
I am too.
Yeah, love pesto.
Well, it's a great way to preserve, you know, because you can freeze whatever you don't use or whatever.
Right.
So
yeah, perfect. All right, and so next on the list, which again is one I think people also often overlook, and it doesn't have any kind of flower, so it's, I mean, it does have a succus, I guess it's called, not really a flower, but most people overlook it. So we're going to talk about plantain, which I love.
Yeah, plantain it's such a cool plant. I almost want to say that this was the plant that got me into foraging. I'm not sure, I have to think back, but when I so plantain is like a plant that it's like something that's ingrained from my childhood, like playing in my backyard. I knew this plant so well, never knew what it was called, just knew that it was there. And like clover, you know, another one. Right. But clover, I knew what it was called. But as a kid, yeah, you just see it so much. And then as I like started getting into herbalism and foraging, and I started reading about plantain and seeing pictures, I'm like, I know that plant. I've known that plant my entire life. Right. But I didn't know that it was usable. Right. You know. So so plantain, it's a basal rosette of leaves that have very like prominent veins. Mm-hmm. And then like you said, the little flower stalk that kind of comes up a little bit higher. And there's different varieties of plantain, broadleaf and narrowleaf, and their flowers look slightly different. I mean, similar, but slightly different. But it's kind of hard to describe the flowers, but they're not like typical flowers. Yeah. But it's a great plant. So it is an edible plant, but it's not one that's used for its edible uses as much as some of the other plants that I've talked about. The leaves can get really tough and fibrous when they're older, but when they're young, if you get them young enough, you can definitely use them. And they're probably best like chopped up and used in soups or stews. But they are highly nutritious, have a lot of vitamins and minerals. So if you can get some young plantain leaves, it's a great way to use them. But mostly it's a medicinal plant. So it's really good at healing wounds. It's like one of the top herbs people would use in like a healing herbal salve or whatever for healing like minor wounds and also as a poultice. So I always tell people that like if you're a hiker or if you're somebody who goes out in the woods a lot, it's super good to know about plantain, because if you get a minor injury or you get stung by a bee or whatever, you can chew up some plantain leaves and put it right on the right. Yeah, or if you get a rash or whatever, it's just a really great plant for that type of usage. And I think I already mentioned it's good as a healing salve. Yeah, really good as a healing salve.
It is great. I always put plantain in my all-purpose kind of healing salve. Right?
I do too.
Yeah, always. It's always in there. And in fact, I had sent some to my aunt who used it when she had shingles, and she said it was absolutely the only thing that helped her with the itch. I know plantain is really good for itch, so I'm assuming that it was the plantain in the healing salve that worked for her itch the best. I do tend to put a lot just because I have a lot of it around.
Yeah. And I've heard people say because like stinging nettle is another plant that people often go foraging for, and so if you get stung by the stinging nettles, that plantain leaves will take that. We'll take that sting out. So I've heard people say that. I haven't actually tried it myself, but do you get the broadleaf or the narrowleaf?
The broadleaf.
Oh, you do? Yeah. We get I see the broadleaf occasionally, but we mostly get the narrowleaf around.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I think I've only ever seen the broadleaf my whole life. I'm originally from the East Coast, from Pennsylvania, and so I think that was always the broadleaf too. I don't think I've ever actually seen the narrow. I mean, I've seen pictures of it, but I don't think I've ever actually seen it in the wild.
Yeah, yeah. And then I recently found out about another one that looks very similar. I'm trying to remember what it's called. I can't remember what it's called right now, but it's I mean, it's a plantain species, but it's very similar to the broadleaf, but it's like giant.
Oh yeah.
And it grows on the Oregon coast. So yeah, and we saw it once, and it was like, you can't even like fathom. It was like as big as my 2-year-old. It was huge. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it was super tall. Yeah.
Right, yes,
I think it's called like black seeded plantain, I think is what I want to say. Yeah.
And same kind of healing stuff.
Same healing properties, and it's native, I think, to the west coast. So
right, there's always something different, right? Yeah. Like I have orange honeysuckle, which is native to this part of the country, and everybody's always like, orange honeysuckle. I'm like, yeah, trust me, it's just, it's just to this part of the world, you know.
Different variety. Yeah.
We all have our thing. All right, and our last one we're going to talk about is purple dead nettle, which I will say I don't have any wild growing in my yard.
Oh, interesting.
I have tons of henbit, which looks very similar, but it's not
very similar. Yeah, yeah. And I could talk a little bit about henbit too, but yeah, purple dead nettle and it's just one that I don't know. I feel like in the past few years, a lot of people are learning about it and getting excited because it kind of grows in these like big patches once it does grow. So then it's like all of a sudden you have a lot of this like plant and you're like, what is this? You know, so it's a mint family plant. And so that means it has a square stem. All mint family plants have a square stem. So that's one good way to identify it. And then it has these little purple tops. It kind of grows in like this triangular fashion, and it's maybe no more than a foot tall, probably less, usually 6 or 8 inches tall. And so it has these little purple tops with pink flowers. If you know mint family plants, it has that very similar flower that all mint family plants have. And little tiny triangular shaped leaves. And they're kind of hairy, not like super hairy, but just like a little bit fuzzy. Right. And it's called dead nettle because, I don't know, I mean, people think that it looks like stinging nettle, but if you look at a picture next to stinging nettle, it really doesn't look like stinging nettle at all. But anyways, it apparently to some people looks, maybe when stinging nettle is smaller, maybe they look similar. They have the triangular shaped leaves, so that kind of thing, but it's dead nettle because it does not have a sting, so that's why it's called dead nettle. And they're not all purple dead nettles. There are white dead nettles, and so there are other varieties of dead nettle, but purple dead nettle seems to be the most common in most areas. So yeah, it's an edible one. It's not one that you necessarily want to eat in huge amounts. Mostly it has those fuzzy leaves, which is not like really that palatable. And some people don't really like the flavor, say that it tastes a little like musky. So it's one to sort of use in moderation, or chop it up real finely as like an herb garnish, or combine with other plants, like I mentioned before, when making a pesto. It does kind of have an off flavor. Like I wouldn't make a pesto of just purple dead nettle. People do. I mean, I've seen people do it. But I prefer to like combine it with some other stuff. So, but it is highly medicinal. Just like most of the plants we've talked about today, it's really good as a poultice or used in a salve. And one thing that people really love about it is for people that have allergy, like seasonal allergies, it's supposed to be really beneficial for that, like taken as a tea. Would be probably the main way people take it. Or I suppose you could make a tincture out of it too.
Right. Oh, that's good. I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah.
And I have not, I'm getting older apparently. I have not really had seasonal allergies in my life, like as I was a young.
I haven't either, so.
But in the last year or two, I have started to have some, and this year in particular, and they did say locally that there was some tree pollen that was particularly bad this year, and it was really, like for 2 weeks I was just sneezy and I had these runny eyes, and it was just something.
yeah.
So yeah.
Well, you can try purple dead nettle if you ever find it, but so henbit is the other one that people get them confused all the time, and they do look pretty similar. I would say if you see them side by side and somebody says this is purple dead nettle and this is henbit, then you can kind of see the differences. But they have the same, square stem, and they're about the same height, and they have the same little pink flowers. But Henbit kind of has these leaves that go like all around the stem, where purple dead nettles are kind of a little more facing downwards and in a more triangle fashion.
And then it's just not as purple either at the top.
It's not as purple. No, the flowers are pink-ish or whatever, but yeah, that doesn't have the little purple tops.
No.
So.
But you use what you have. I interviewed Chris from Joy Belief Farm. We talked about when the first really started getting into herbalism. I met a gal who a wonderful herbalist, been an herbalist for a long time, and she says, what you need is around you. You just have to look. Right? So like whatever you need is, sometimes we do need things that are a little more exotic, but it's rare, and that's why you don't have it close by. The things that you need the most of are close by.
Yeah, that's
like
a
the
great way to think about it.
Most true thing, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
We should only have to go hiking for 100 miles to get that really rare plant once or twice in our lifetimes. If ever. Hopefully, knock on wood, we don't need those exotic things.
Yeah. So these are the 5 plants that I came up with. These are kind of more spring oriented plants, but there's a lot more plants that you may or may not find in your backyard or whatever.
Right. You mentioned clover, and for me, like, I don't get red clover till late in the year, summer.
Yeah. We get red clover and white clover, and like yarrow would be another one that grows everywhere around here anyways, and pineapple weed, like wild chamomile.
Yeah.
That's a real common one. And there's a lot. One thing I recommend people to do is start looking at the weeds in your yard, and mallow's another one. We get tons of mallow all over. And maybe try to identify it, look it up online, get a book, or there's even like apps you can use now, and you'll be surprised. Not every single one's going to be edible, but I think people would be surprised by the uses of some of the plants that are just growing themselves.
Right. And I think it's so much easier when we think about foraging if we do just start in our backyard, because it's not as exotic. And I get that, like, for people who are inexperienced, foraging for wild mushrooms, for example, is overwhelming because it can be positively frightening, right? Like, eat this and live, eat this and die, right? That's kind of how mushrooms feel sometimes. I took a mushroom course years ago, and that's really what I wanted from the guy. Like, we were out in Glacier Park, and we're not in Glacier Park, but in the forest next to Glacier Park. You're allowed to forage. Don't anyone yell at me. You're not allowed to harvest mushrooms from Glacier Park. But we were in the Flathead National Forest, and he was just like, that's all I wanted was like, tell me, eat this and live, eat this and die. Like, I wanted it to be dumbed down that much. I already knew morels, right? And I already knew a couple other things, but some of the other ones I didn't really, and he never really quite gave me that.
Yeah. Mushrooms can definitely be tricky. And once I started researching it, though, you realize that there's just these select few, less than a handful, that are that are going to kill you. And once you learn what they are like, I feel like it's best to start with what's toxic, right. And then there's all these other ones that you don't really want to eat because they don't taste good or whatever, but they're not going to kill you, and then there's these select few that are like really delicious.
Right. Yeah. Perfect. So yes, definitely. And that's one of the things about Cultivate and Nourish is that we're encouraging people to start small and build on it and gain confidence. So if you can gain confidence in foraging from your own backyard, and if you live in an apartment building and you don't have your own backyard, pick a local park that isn't sprayed, lots of them, where it's legal to forage, and go and forage and look around for stuff and bring that stuff home, or a friend's house or whatever, or the community garden will definitely have weeds that you can forage.
Yeah, totally.
You don't have to have a backyard. Don't let that stop you.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I have several, I live on a nice piece of land, but I have several local parks that have things that I don't have, like arrowleaf balsam root, for example, doesn't really grow on my land, but it grows very close. And so I just go there and pick, and harvest. Yeah. You can pick things that you want. All right. Great. Well, thank you so much, Colleen. So Colleen is at growforagecookferment.com. Yes, and we'll have links to that below. But she also has a really wonderful foraging course, and I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I have a foraging course. It's called Gather and Root, and it's an online foraging course. And I talk about over 60 different plants, and I do talk about some mushrooms, and I talk about, flowers and roots and lichens and all different types of edible and medicinal plants. And it's a great way to learn. You get a little bit of my knowledge, and then we also have a Facebook group for the course, and it's just sort of turned into this really good community of people who are really interested in foraging, and they're learning too, so they're not experts necessarily, but we all sort of like learn from each other. And it's great. Most of the plants I talk about are very common and grow, I would say, like mostly worldwide in temperate regions or whatever. So I have people in the course from Europe and even a couple people from Australia, and they found it to be highly useful for their areas too. So, I talk mostly about like popular common plants similar to the ones that I talked about today. So, and then I also have a little sample if anybody's interested. And so it's of the purple dead nettle. It's the info sheets. So these are the info sheets that I have for every single plant in the course. And so I'm offering the purple dead nettle ones for free, and you'll probably link to them.
I will. They'll be down below. Everyone can go and grab them.
Yeah. So yeah, you can get a little sample of what the downloadable sheets are like, but the course does also include videos and tons of pictures and recipes and all sorts of things. So
it's a lot of fun. I had the opportunity to preview it before you ever released it, so it's a really very great thing. Right, so we will include links to all that, plus where you can read Colleen's blog and find her on social media down below. So thank you very much, Colleen.
Yeah, thanks for having me.